seconds for it to hit. So let me just hold on for that. And then we'll be live on LinkedIn as well as on YouTube. And if all
Oh,
goes
excellent.
well, that happened by now.
That's
There we
brilliant.
go. It is, right? Technology is amazing,
No, well
isn't it?
done.
Okay, let me just get a couple of things out of the way because, David, sometimes you see like these 7 million tabs opening up on your screen and you don't really know, you know,
Yeah,
where things are happening. So let me just sort this out. Okay, I think we're good to go. So
great.
let me do a quick introduction first. Welcome to this Master Your Exit live show powered by The Big Exit. My name is Lynn and I'll be your host for today. And I have a very special guest that I have been looking forward to have on the show for a very long time already. I'm just going to do a quick introduction in a second. Just wanted to let you know if you are watching this live on LinkedIn, on our LinkedIn channel, or on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. If you're here live on the show, I'm not expecting anybody today live on the virtual in our virtual studio, but if you're joining us a little bit later, you can ask your questions via the chat. We'll be able to answer them live during the show. And if you're watching this in replay or later on any of these channels or on our website, you can check all of the episodes on our YouTube channel or on the website, thebigexit.co/master your exit shows. We air every single week. We go live on Tuesday, 7 a.m. in Los Angeles, 10 a.m. in New York, and 3 p.m. in London. And that is exactly where we are going right now because, David, you are based in London. We have also met in London a while ago. David has been in the field of M&A and selling small businesses for more than 30 years. So if you want to talk to someone who knows what they are doing and have seen all the trends up and down for the last couple of decades, David is your man. He is in charge of M&A advisory based in the UK, has a lot of sector expertise for selling agencies specifically as well. So we're going to talk about that too. And I'd love to hear his take on what's selling like hotcakes when it comes to small businesses, what makes a business really attractive to a buyer, what is a little bit more challenging. So we have, I feel like, a lot of things to talk about today. But first of all, David, thank you so much for being on the show today.
A pleasure, Leanne. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you to all the listeners out there for taking time to listen. So that's great.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. David, we have met in London a while ago. At that time, I didn't realize, but you have been selling some agencies of my friends in the past with all great and good recommendations. You have a lot of sector expertise in that as well. So let me just start with a more generic question. If I would ask you what kind of businesses are selling like hotcakes, what's a business that a buyer can't wait to get his or her hands on because it's such an incredible business that they want to buy? That's a generic question. I know that, but I think it kind of creates that framework for our audience, which are business owners who are looking to sell in the next couple of years, who might not know what their business is worth or why their business might be sellable or not so sellable or
Hmm.
could sell like hotcakes.
Hmm.
So I really would love to hear like what's the most easiest business
Mhm.
for you to sell? What are buyers in line for today and nowadays and have always been in line for?
Sure. That's a good question, Leanne. And I don't think that it focuses particularly on one sector or one particular type of business. There are, you could say that, there's always a fashion. There's always a certain business that's in fashion currently. For example, perhaps in the marketing sector, influencer businesses are quite in vogue at the moment, or anything with data. But I'd say the key to it, if you're looking at all businesses and how do you make your business the one that everybody wants to buy? And I think the key to that is what you might describe as sustainability, and not in the green sense of the word, but how sustainable your business is. So when a buyer buys a business or goes to look at a business, his biggest fear is that it might not stay intact for the years while he owns it. It might drop him, the profits might drop, or key people may leave, or all of these sorts of things. So it's really important to make your business in preparing it for sale to be as sustainable as possible. Now, that's a number of things there. I would say look at things like margins to make sure the business has got reasonably healthy margins. I would say around 20% of revenue would be a good margin, so that if you happen to you lose a client or something like that, the chances are that it's not going to tip straight into loss. It's going to keep in the black. Other areas of sustainability are having a good second tier management team, having good, because the buyer will always expect perhaps one day the founder will leave, and therefore if you've got that second tier there, he's going to be covered. Other areas would be having strong systems and procedures, and the founder perhaps working sort of on the business rather than in the business. So founders should try and move themselves away from the day-to-day where possible. Other areas, which is quite interesting, I would say, is from a marketing perspective. And I think that's increasingly so, Leanne. Agencies that we specialize in agencies and consultancies and businesses like that. And I suppose agencies are a little bit like cobblers' children, really, in that agencies don't necessarily market themselves that well. And in this day and age, a very competitive market, what has got you to a certain place in the past won't necessarily get you where you want to go in the future. And so you've got to think about, I mean, agencies, where did agency business come from? Well, a lot of people try networking, for example, to win business, but you need a really strong pipeline. So that means perhaps an outgoing new business pipeline, as well as an inbound new business pipeline to try and attract customers to your business. So I think they're all the things that, and that will create, if you will, a machine that will generate profits and income and cash flow, and that will attract buyers and make the business very easy, much easier to sell. And that's the sort of work we do when we help people sometimes prepare for sale, but we really like businesses in that shape when we go to sell them, ideally.
And if they're not in that shape, we are here at the Big Exit to help them into that shape.
Exactly right. Yeah. So that we like them to
Right.
come from people like you who have
Yeah,
actually done a lot of work on them to get
exactly.
them in shape, for sure.
Yeah. Now, what you're saying, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. We could basically fill a whole program for a whole year that business owners go through to implement all the things that you have suggested here. But there's one element that, maybe two, but there's one element first that I would like to dive in a little bit further, which is the involvement of the owner in the business. So you have mentioned ideally the owner is working on the business but not in the business. They're not operationally involved. There is a second tier management in place. So you've mentioned a couple of these things. Now, what I often see with agencies, consultancy businesses, training businesses, coaching businesses, I'm just going to put them all on one big
Sure.
pile here,
People
is that
businesses. Yeah.
people businesses, exactly. And where I see a lot of owner dependency in those businesses is one, first of all, you have an owner who still does a lot of sales.
It's the hardest thing, I think, to extract yourself from.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Let's assume that I run a service-based business, which it's not even an assumption. I have been in service-based businesses for more than 15 years, so I can totally relate. So let's assume I started a consulting business. I've been, freelancing at first. Then I hired a little bit of a team that was doing the projects for me with the clients, but I'm still doing a lot of, sales for the business. How much should I aim to solve that problem before I'm thinking about selling? Or could I sell even if I'm still the one who is doing most of the sales? Give me a little bit of like insider information there. I know
Yes.
what's the best. It's
Yeah.
me not doing the sales, but
Yeah.
let's say I am still doing the sales. Can I
Yeah.
sell this business or should I do some stuff first?
Yeah, no, no, certainly, and sales. I mean, that's an interesting thing. Just starting taking that one stage further back, sales is the hard. When you get founders in, particularly a smaller business, when you get founders in that business, of all the functions, the last one he lets go of is the sales. It's because and often probably we would advise that's the process to go through. Get rid of the easy things first, the easy things, the things that you're not so specialized in first. So you might want to recruit an interim finance director or a full-time finance director to take all that admin out, for example, and other functions, the operations and things like that. But sales are the hardest because usually the founder is the best salesman. Um, so I think what one of the things, I mean, it is possible to sell a business where the founder is still involved, but it's hard that the way the deal would be structured, it would be harder to get him out so that the buyer would want him involved, and it may involve more of a partnership type deal, and they can be very successful. So if the founder's not quite ready, you might do a deal where perhaps that the buyer buys 60 or 70% of the business and leaves the founder with 30% to carry on building the business for a few years. And that can be very, very attractive for particularly a younger founder who's not ready to retire yet, but wants we say, as our catchphrase says, to play on a bigger stage. But very often you can do really, really well like that in terms of a deal, because you're using the buyer's infrastructure and expertise to really grow your business. So it's not uncommon. I mean, we did a deal a couple of years ago with a business where we sold 60% of the business, and then 3 or 4 years later, it was sold to a private equity backed group, and 3 or 4 years later, they sold the remaining 40. And I think they got about 3 times as much for the 40% as they got for the 60. So it can be very, very attractive, but I would always recommend that you try and make sure you've got someone to take over from you. And I find, and you may have similar experience, but recruiting senior hires is one of the most difficult things you can do in a business, to go and go to a headhunter and say, I need someone to replace me in sales. So the better thing to do is to think long term, maybe 5, 10 years out before you want to sell the agency, and start to think about finding quality, more junior people that you can really bring on and develop, who've got a great attitude, a great ability, who've got a real affinity with your business. And usually in time, they'll be strong enough to take over at least part of that selling function, or a major part of that selling function. But that would be the route I'd take. Don't know if
This is
in your experience, you have a similar.
Absolutely. And this is such valuable advice. And it's the same advice that I keep on saying all the time, over and over and over again. It's also the same advice that a lot of business owners do not want to hear, because by the time that they're thinking about selling, most of them still do the sales indeed. And it basically means that either you're going to sell, but you're going to stay on board, or you're not going to sell, you won't be able to sell, and
Mm,
you will have to build that sales team first. So
mm,
I think just it's very clear advice, and I think it's honest and open advice to small business owners out there. This is a question mark or a problem that you have to solve as a business owner in how do you organize your marketing and your sales. And that's, I think, as you were saying as well, it's often the final stage of kind of making you as the owner kind of independent from your business. It's also the hardest stage. I fell over that stage before in a business where I really struggled to kind of build that team around me that was able to do the sales. So I know from experience, it's not just about, hiring that person and have them under your wings for 1 or 2 years and you're good to go or you're good to
Mm.
sell. That's not the case. It's often a
No.
process that takes quite a few years for you to be able to set that up. Let's talk a little bit about the steps before that, because often there are other things that a business owner starts delegating before they start delegating
Hmm.
sales. And let's talk a little bit about how they get the job done for the clients.
Hmm.
Because this is one of the arguments that I hear very often from agency owners as well. They've often started the business because they were really good at something. They're really
Yeah.
good at marketing. They're really good at like influencing through TikTok, or they're really good at, solving one particular problem for their clients.
Hmm.
And a lot of them will still say, even though I have junior people on my team that are doing client facing work and client delivery work, I still need to touch all of the things in order to have it really truly right and kind of be that gatekeeper for creative quality and those, that last 10% that
Mm.
sets us apart from anybody else in this market. Uh,
Mm.
How do you go about that specifically? Like, what would you answer to a owner who's looking to sell, but is also still, like doing those sprinkles of magic in the
Yeah.
client delivery?
Yeah. Look, it happens. It's quite common. I think you have to be quite grown up about it and not assume you're always the best person to do it. And treat it as a credit to yourself that you have managed to find an apprentice, as it were, that can do it better than you can. And I think that's the real challenge. And be proud that you've actually created a team that can do as well or even better than you, because that is always possible, because the market's changing, the dynamics of the company are changing all the time. So I think I would always advise people to try and make the company work without them, even for their quality of life as well. They can get away for a week's holiday on the odd occasion. But yeah.
100%, absolutely. And you've already just touched base on this just in one of the last sentence that you were mentioning about like, trends in the market and things that you're seeing happening in the market. So we touched base already on like what makes a business sell like hotcakes, and
Mm.
owner independency is really crucial in that, in both client delivery but also in sales. Like, this is one of the problems as a business owner you need to solve before you're putting your business on the
Hmm.
market. And if you can't solve the sales problem and you're still involved with that, it will come with some strings attached when you're selling the business,
Indeed.
likely
Yeah.
having to stay on
Yeah,
board.
especially if you want to exit. Some people don't. They want to use the business, as I said, for a bigger stage.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. If you get to that point where you want to exit, you need to make yourself almost redundant. And
Yeah.
in fact, as an M&A advisor, we've had conversations with buyers where the buyers deal directly with the second management team. The chemistry meetings, the culture meetings, the proposition meetings are with that second tier management, and the owner is almost treated like an investor. An out. That's when it can be very, very successful.
I love how you frame that, because this is one of the things that I talk about a lot. I've written a couple of blog posts around it as well. That journey of, an entrepreneur where often in service-based industries, the entrepreneur has started as a consultant, a freelancer, a one-man, one-woman show. Then the business becomes too big. They start hiring people who do customer delivery and product delivery as well. Then they start hiring people for the support functions, and they move from being a freelancer to becoming an entrepreneur, right?
Hmm.
They're starting to build that team, maybe 5 people, 10 people, just small and mighty, I would say. And I
Yeah.
think that it's a great place to be in as you know, making that shift from freelancer to entrepreneur. But then when you're thinking about selling your business, that's when you mentally have to start making the shift from being, you know, the entrepreneur to being the owner investor,
Yes.
where you're like, I don't run this business, but I own this business like
Yeah.
an asset. Just
Yes.
like I own a house that I'm renting out, or I own an investment portfolio, or I own ATFs, or whatever it is that you're owning, and start
Yeah.
looking at your business as an asset that you
Yes.
are building that can grow without your direct involvement, that can do well sustainably over a longer period of time. So I love that you've used that word, you know, owner investor, because that's
Yeah.
exactly, it's more, it's not only a mindset shift. Obviously, there's also things that need to happen in the business
Yeah.
for that to happen, but it often comes with that identity shift that a business owner needs to make, where they're not calling themselves, you know, like the jack of all trades, or like the person that is the owner of the business, but rather as the investor who by coincidence owns 100% of that business, but
Mm.
that might change in the future. So
Yes.
thank you so much for, you know, changing that perspective in wording, because I think it's a switch that people who are in business need to make when they're thinking about selling their business.
Yes.
Because once you start looking at your business as an asset rather than a thing that requires your day-to-day involvement,
Mm.
it changes how you handle that asset and how involved you are willing to be in that
Yes, no,
asset.
I think that's absolutely right. Yeah. And
How's
as
that?
an owner, though, of course, as you mentioned, like any asset, you have to keep, you can't, you need to delegate, but you can't abdicate. It's important to keep a sort of a hand, a soft hand on the tiller, just to, you know, see what's happening, even if it's, you know, once a week or once a month, reviewing the accounts. But you're absolutely right. That is going to be your target, as it were, to be an owner investor, as a so you come through all of those three stages, from freelancer to entrepreneur to owner investor, in those in that line. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that path. And I think for most people who are watching this, or people that we work with in the big exit, they're at that stage of being an entrepreneur, and
Mm.
they're ready not only to do the things that are required to make their business sellable, but also change that mindset, you know,
Yeah.
and also the emotional connection that they have to the business
Yes.
as well.
Uh-huh.
I think that
Yes.
changes too when you're starting to think as your business is no longer your baby, but
Mm.
it's an asset.
Yeah.
Right? It's a
Yeah.
very, you kind of emotionally start looking differently at your business as well, which then in turn will also help you to sell your business in a more strategic way, I would say too.
Yes, yes, you have to think strategically. Although obviously, you know, emotion comes into it, particularly in people businesses where I suppose it's slightly digressing, and I don't mean to, but when you sell a business, especially if you are going to be involved for a little while, because it may be difficult to completely get to that position where you're just purely an owner investor. It's definitely a target, but you might get 80% there, excuse me, or 90% there. But when you sell a business, it's important that there's a chemistry between you and the buyer, and there's a cultural fit, which is a style of working between you and the buyer. And also the buyer offers the business, again, that's thinking strategically, an outstanding business proposition where there's a real chance of the business doing extremely well under the new owner.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like we could continue this conversation for a couple of more hours.
Yep.
There's just so much to unpack here, but maybe for the last couple of minutes, let's talk a little bit about the trends that you are seeing in the M&A space and specifically for service-based businesses and, consultancy businesses, coaching businesses, agencies, all these kinds of things. You already touched a little bit about on how you see that like influencer marketing businesses are really hot at the moment. One of my friends just did a really sweet exit as well with her
Mhm.
influencer agency. So I can, testify to what you were saying as well.
Mhm.
But where do you see the market in M&A specifically for these kinds of industries? Where do you see it going? What are like the trends that you see where you're like, if you're in this kind of business, you might want to think shorter term in selling because the market's gonna change not so much in your preference. And
Yeah.
if you're in this kind of sector, you might want to hold on a little bit longer because it's gonna boom in the next 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if there's anything specific like that, Leanne, because I mean the changes in the marketplace have been enormous. I mean, I suppose I've been doing this about 30 years, and when I started doing this, all I had was to make, 5 or 6 phone calls to the big, large holding companies to sell a marketing business. But the buyer universe has fragmented enormously now. There's private equity backed businesses, there's trade investors, there's as I say, private equity backed trading businesses are a big part of the market. There's the globalization of businesses where you've got a lot more overseas buyers now. So that has happened. So when we take on an agency or a client to sell, we have to do an awful lot more research, and we spend a lot of our time talking with various buyers during the course of our day. That's been quite important. I think, like anything, the speed of the world has affected the M&A market, and that's quite important. That once upon a time, buyers used to do a thing called an earnout, and that's still used quite a bit, but it's less common than it was now. Buyers want to, because the thing about the earnout is the business does not belong to the buyer until the very last payment has been made. Therefore, they can't integrate the business and use it, and work with it as quickly as they would wish now. So therefore, what they generally do is find other incentive payments for the seller so they can integrate the business, from day one and really exploit the market together. So that's another trend. I think buyers are more savvy now than they were. So sustainability that we talked about at the beginning of the
Mm-hmm.
program is increasingly important. Buyers look out for all of these sorts of things. Has it got a second tier? Are the margins strong? Has it got good systems and procedures? All of those elements. And I think in terms of the future, sort of businesses in the future will have to create more of a marketing machine. As I say, they've been sort of cobbler's children before a little bit with marketing. They'll have to get quite sophisticated, inbound, outbound new business. They have to think about perhaps being more of a honeypot rather than a hunter in terms of how they win their new business so that the business comes to them. And that's perhaps, um, exploiting things like algorithms on social media platforms so that, your business is recognized more than others, rather than perhaps more of the old-fashioned networking and ringing round potential clients and things like
Yeah.
that. You want to draw
Yeah.
clients to you. But as particular sectors, I think they emerge, and are very, but predicting what they are is a difficult one. But my view is most businesses, if they're in the right condition, will be able to sell, no
Yeah.
question.
I remember you saying that when we spoke many, many, many lifetimes ago
Yeah.
in London. And that was one of the first questions that I asked you. I was like, can any business be sold? And you were like, yes. Maybe not to the terms and conditions and the price that the buyer or the seller might want, but yes, every business is sellable. So I really love that statement as well, because that's one of the things that we believe too, that is the
Right.
case. But
Yep.
obviously, if you want to have your big exit, then it comes with a couple of, like strings and requirements and stuff like that. And the better it is in shape, obviously, the more likely you will have your big exit and not just an exit that you might regret over time as well,
Mm,
because
mm.
that happens
And
too.
clearly, it's one of those areas where size matters to a certain degree. The higher you get in terms of profits. Now, if you get to around able to achieve £1 million profit, that opens a whole new strata of buyers very often. So not
Yeah.
only does that strata open up to you, generally buyers view a business that's a higher profitability to be more sustainable, because again, it can take shocks. It's more likely to have all of those things in place that you look for. So if you can
Awesome.
get to that level in terms of growth, then you're going to get a much bigger exit than you will if you're a
Yeah.
smaller business. Much.
Amazing. And that reminds me that we've written a blog post specifically around that, or like who would buy my business and the level of profitability you need to have in order to get into a certain set of potential buyers. So I'm going to put that link in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for just highlighting that.
Great.
That leaves us, I think. Do you believe this, David? We've been chatting for 30 minutes
It's
already.
gone very, very quickly. Yeah, phenomenal. That's
We need
great.
to have you again on the show, I would
No,
say.
I'd be absolutely delighted. It's been a real
Let's do
pleasure. Very
let's
enjoyable.
do let's do a follow-up, I would say,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your expertise. I'll also put your LinkedIn profile link in the show notes as well, so
Yeah.
people can connect with you directly too, if they're looking to sell their business, and specifically service-based businesses and agencies. M&A advisory has been in that space for more than 30 years. And as you can see as well, David is just an amazing guy. Like you want
Oh,
him
that's
to
very
take care
kind
of
of you.
you when you're selling your business. So thank you so much for watching this show. This is a wrap. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching live. Thank you for watching it in replay as well. If you want to join us live in the virtual studio, that's always possible. You just head to our website, thebigexit.co/master your exit show sign up. And there you can sign up for the show and also leave your exit related questions. You can come and join us here in the virtual studio. So we are happy to answer them for you. As you know, every Tuesday we go live for 30 minutes on LinkedIn and on our YouTube channel, or you can watch the replay on our website or listen to it on your favorite podcast platform as well. David, thank you so much for being here on the show. I'm looking forward to invite you again and continue our conversation. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being here as well.
Likewise, Leanne, thank you very much indeed for
Awesome.
inviting me
Thank
and for all those that
you.
have listened. All the best.
Thank
Thank
you.